Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Stanisci. He's Gary Groob. We have a very special guest, Athan Iannucci, all-star MVP, current coach of Aledo High School in Texas. Texas is not really a renowned place for lacrosse, so how did that happen? But first, what we want to know from our guest is how he picked up the stick. How did you pick up the stick, Athan?
Basically, a newsletter went home. I think it was grade 3. Mrs. Meisner was my teacher at the time. But a newsletter went home, and for whatever reason, I was hell bent on playing lacrosse. And my dad had a little bit of experience growing up watching Burnaby Cablevision, so he knew about it. But then, yeah, I started harassing my parents to play. I tried to get in with Coquitlam. There was a wait list, and I could get in with Port Moody. So I started playing with Port Moody at about age 8, I want to say.
All right, so there's a newsletter. You answer the newsletter. You show up. What's kept you in the game?
I mean, there's so many things about lacrosse that I love. It's such a dynamic sport, just from the stick. You can't just buy a stick off the shelf. As everybody knows, you have to really make it yours. And once it becomes part of you, you have a hard time letting that thing go. And that was one really cool part. I love I already used the word dynamic, but I mean, that's exactly what the sport is. It's fast paced, it's aggressive. There's scoring, there's hitting, there's still fighting in one of the only 2 sports left that has fighting, which I think is a really cool thing. And not for the fighting, just for the fact that it polices the game. And I don't know. I rue the day that they take it out of both the NLL and or the NHL. But yeah, and then obviously the relationships I've formed, it's been, I think every major friend I have has come through lacrosse in one form or another. If you play football, it's like, oh, I play football. Oh, me too. Like, you don't know each other. But if you play lacrosse, there's a good chance that through 1 or 2 degrees of separation, you guys are ended up connected in some way. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, I guess that has a lot to do with the constant playing of the game year round, and switching teams and stuff like that. So it doubles and triples the opportunity to get to know people.
Yeah, and then obviously it is a little bit smaller player base than some of the other sports. But even as it's grown, I've found it's stayed very true to its kind of grassroots type feel, where everybody's looking to help everybody. Everybody's looking to connect with everybody, and the rising tide raises all ships. So that's been really neat.
Now I'm going to turn you loose on Gary.
Alrighty. We've had a couple of guests in the last couple of weeks that are old teammates of you and send their regards. One was Jeff Snyder. Another one was Paul Dawson last week. Awesome. And both send their regards. But Snyder said a really interesting thing about you was watching you practice was something else, because all the things that you would practice that would be like this in a game that made it look like it would just came to you naturally. But that's the true essence of a superstar, is someone who practices so much and puts in the work so much that it looks like it's just God-given talent, but there's so much more. Jeff Teat nowadays comes to mind with that kind of thing, that puts in so much work before. When he goes to the hill, he's working out at 6 o'clock in the morning before anybody gets there. And then a little God-given talent never hurts either. It seems to mirror a lot of your career, because you had so much talent, but put in an awful lot of work along the way too.
Yeah, well, first off, I have a lot of respect for Jeff Snyder. I think it takes one to know one. He's clearly somebody who's, climbed the highest peak of what's capable for your position. He's left an indelible mark on the game, so that's cool to hear him say that. I have a lot of respect for him as a player and a guy. So, but yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's a certain level of obsession And for whatever reason, I just really took to lacrosse, and I would use every available moment to be down in my unfinished basement, throwing the ball against the wall. Um, Funny side note, I only had about 7.5 foot ceilings down there, so I think I kind of got comfortable with the sidearm and the underhand, largely because of that. But yeah, and I was fortunate enough to be, a 5 minute, 10 minute bike ride away from two to three different boxes, and I would go down there until you couldn't even see anymore. And I it's interesting today because I always have parents ask me like, "Oh, like what drill can this kid do? What drill can we work on?" And it's if I was going to answer completely honestly, it's almost like it's the be obsessed drill. It's not one thing. It's like just everything I did at one point was just I looked at it through the lens of whether this was going to help me get better at lacrosse or not. And yeah, it was definitely an all consuming thing. But I mean, I think I think to get to any level of success, I guess, in any field, it definitely takes a certain level of that ambition or that um, obsession, if you will. So, yeah, I would just kind of go out at night, like when I had free time. If I wasn't when I was at college, I don't know. I went to college a little bit later than other people too, so I'd kind of done the whole partying and bar side of things. And when everybody wanted to go to frat houses and bars, it was a lot less appealing to me. And, oftentimes at 2 a.m., instead of being out with the guys getting into trouble, I would just be outside of my quad, just throwing the ball against the wall literally at 2 a.m. And so, I mean, yeah, I think it paid off. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, and that Jeff noticed that. Um, and then, yeah, so.
Well, he brought up a specific thing of behind the back shots and watching you do these things in practice ad nauseum, that you could do this like this in a game. And it just, because you put in so much work, that this was another tool in the toolbox, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's anything. And I think sports these days have recognized that as well, that there's a certain level of just getting in reps, but not only reps, but quality reps at a high level of effort and at a high level of efficiency, and, just doing it the right way over and over. Obviously, it's easy to learn bad habits. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right. Johnny Davis was another one who brought up that same kind of idea, because when he was little, he kept talking about Miller Bowl. And
Mhm.
of course, he said there was a swimming pool on the other side. He never saw it because he never stopped any further than the box himself. But one of his jobs when he was a little kid was he had to hammer the nails back in. Instead of using a hammer, he would take his lacrosse stick and ball and practice every shot to put every nail in. And sometimes took him 8-10 hours. He'd get in trouble
Mhm.
at home for coming home late, but it became Johnny Shooter Davis, right? By doing
I
things
can
like that.
imagine that takes some serious discipline. I heard a story that Jack Bionda used to play against a telephone pole, like a rounded telephone pole. So if you're a little bit off to the center, you're chasing your ball quite a long way for the rebound. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty common trope across all sports. I mean, to reach the highest of high levels, and there's no guarantee that you will if you do these things, but to get to those levels, there has to be a certain level of insanity, as most people would measure it, I guess. But yeah, you got to push the envelope, right? I always tell kids, like, if you're not missing or you're not screwing up, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Because if you're just 100% successful on everything you do, then you're not challenging yourself enough. And there's always another way you can make it a little bit more difficult. So,
like garage doors in hockey.
exactly, yeah, all the dents that your parents just hope that one day your NHL career will pay for.
I'll get you a whole new house, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right, let's talk a bit about the junior career over in BC with
Mhm.
Coquitlam. Let's talk a bit about the program is storied, still to this day, storied program.
Mhm.
How'd you get in, and talk about some of the coaching that you had while you were there and developing?
Sorry, which program specifically? Coquitlam?
Well, with the ADNAC program itself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, both. I had a chance to play with St. Catharines, and I think
Mhm.
both of those,
Yeah, we'll get to that one for
are,
two.
yeah, yeah, sure. But in Coquitlam, um, so like I mentioned earlier, I got in my minor career with Port Moody. and then it got to a certain point where I guess I technically could have played with Coquitlam, but I was grandfathered in with Port Moody, and I already had friends and everything there, so I kept playing with Port Moody. And then I got to a point where there just was no junior program with Port Moody, so I defaulted to playing with Coquitlam. I met like people like Jason Bloom there, some of my longtime friends, but Peter Tellis. But yeah, so my junior career started there, and it was awesome. I remember, I don't know, just because you mentioned Poirier Arena and Coquitlam, I don't know exactly the year that this was. I'm sure somebody who's really good with lacrosse stats would be able to tell right away. But I went to a Minto Cup. I want to say it was like game 5, and it was between Coquitlam and Six Nations. And it was the old Poirier Arena with like the sloped walls that went away. And it was so full of people. There was people like all like leaned up against the wall, kind of like perched up on the wall. All the like cement stairs were filled with people. One half was all natives just hammering on drums, and it was like the most electric building I'd ever been in my life. And I remember I was sitting on the cement stairs because there was no regular seats left anymore, and I could feel the vibration of the drums and the people screaming, and I was like, that has always been one of the most indelible marks that has been left, by certainly by watching lacrosse, hands down. But like you mentioned, it's a storied organization. You got players like Grant and Ogilvy and Doyle, and man, I almost don't even want to keep listing players because I'm gonna forget people that I should remember. But you already said it. It's an amazing place to play. It's one of the things that I do miss about BC is just the lacrosse culture of the whole Tri-City kind of Lower Mainland area. It's very unique, and it's an awesome thing. So yeah, I was very lucky.
Yeah. Well, in Ontario, you left an indelible mark too as a junior because you won the Joe Newendike Award for top rookie in the OLA.
That's funny. I guess
talk about your splash into OLA here in Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at the time there was a weird situation that was going on. We had a couple coaches who were, they were good guys and they were good coaches, but for whatever reason, I remember Andy Ogilvy and Kurt Milosky, another great Coquitlam player, they really wanted to coach our junior team. And there was a whole bunch of guys that were like, man, if we could get these two guys to coach our team, like it would just be amazing. Think of all we could learn, blah, blah, blah. And for whatever reason, there was some conflict in the back offices, and then ended up between different players. And it turned out that there was just a bunch of players that didn't end up wanting to play that year for Coquitlam because of the lack of willingness to have these two kind of perennial all-stars be our coaches. So I kind of ended up in a weird spot. Like, obviously I wanted to play. And I don't even remember how it happened. Somehow I got in contact with Bob Louis from St. Catharines, and they offered me to come out there and play. And so I went out there to play, and unbeknownst to me at this time, they were multiple Minto Cup champion. I think they were coming off an incredible season the year prior. And yeah, I stepped into it. It's a different game out east. And I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly what it is. There's some playing style that's a little different. I think also because it's usually a 5-year program, like in BC, they'll play intermediate for a year or two. And I remember I was playing intermediate for 2 years when there was guys out east that have been playing junior for those extra 2 years. I always wondered how that would have affected my development as a player, getting 5 years of junior.
Right.
But, the OLA was a very competitive, physical, tight, tightly competitive league. And yeah, it was really cool. But we ended up going, I think, through every single game of regular season undefeated. I think we swept our 2 or 3 rounds of playoffs to get to the Minto Cup, and we went all the way back to Burnaby to play in the Minto Cup. And we won the first game, and we're like, oh man, we're on easy street. And I'd grown up playing against Burnaby, people like Jeff Snyder and Taylor Ray over the years. And I knew they weren't just going to lie down and take it. And, they were always a very, very physical, gritty, chippy, intimidating kind of team. And without, doing anything that's over the line, like if there was ever a scrum that had one guy in it, one-on-one, like they had four guys in there immediately. And they just, I think it was, who was the coach back then? Day? Was it Day?
Yeah.
I think it might have been.
I believe so, yes.
Paul Day, yeah. But anyway, they had great coaching, great players, and to their credit, I think they came back and they swept us in 4 games straight, and that culminated with game 2. I think they were pulling all the normal Burnaby stuff, which I don't fault them for. All is fair in love, war, and lacrosse, I guess. If it's not a penalty, it's not. If the ref doesn't call it, it's not a penalty, I should say.
Right.
But at some point, one of our players got mad, threw a water bottle over the partitioning glass, and hit Nick Patterson in the side of the head. And then next thing you know, they were throwing stuff back and forth. And at one point, players, at least from our bench, I don't remember if it was their bench, but I remember Sean Kapinski went over the glass into the stands and ended up getting in a fist fight with Shane Bennett, of all people. And like, so random. And yeah, like I said, they created enough, adversity and ruckus and made us kind of play their game over the next 4 games that they ended up stealing the Minto Cup from us. But what an experience. And that's quite the story. We still laugh about that one to this day, how that kind of devolved into that.
Absolutely. Now you talked a bit about college. You went to Hofstra and you played 3 years. You couldn't get that 4th year. You denied it because of your OLA playing. Let's talk about the time in Hofstra. And of course you played for John Danowski, talking about another Hall of Fame coach. Like, wow. So, but you were primarily a box guy, weren't you?
Yeah. So funnily enough, I think I started playing field when I was about 15, 16. So I did have a little bit of an experience going into university. But, just like the field in Canada for a long time, it's not like this now, but for a long time back when I was playing, it was almost like it was just box lacrosse outside with big sticks. Like there wasn't a lot of people switching hands. It was if you watched it, you'd be like, oh, these are box players. So I had a little bit of experience. And at one point I was playing for the Beer Hunters. And, again, nowadays everybody realizes you can get scholarships. You can, you work for grade 9, 10, 11, 12, make sure your grades are good, do good in school. Like there's a real chance for a lot of Canadians to get a scholarship. I didn't know that growing up really. And I kind of figured this out in maybe end of grade 11, beginning of grade 12. And so I put together a game tape and I just videotape. I put a tripod on the side and filmed the Beer Hunters lacrosse. It was at Vancouver Field, which was a pretty gross field. We had like the blue jerseys with the yellow numbers, like the Adnac type jerseys. And then our thing was everybody wore different colored Hawaiian shorts. And I don't know. And we were called the Beer Hunters. So I made a video of this, and that was the first half of the video was this game, us playing against the Pioneers or something. And then the second half was me out at Eagle Ridge box, just ripping shots of the box all alone. And I sent this video to these guys, and I'll loop back around to answer your question. I just think it's a funny story, but that's actually what they recruited me from, was that video of me playing lacrosse. It looked like in the woods, in the box by myself in some wife beater. My hair was crazy at the time. And they're like, who is this maniac? And the Beer Hunters with the Aloha, like Hawaiian shorts. But to their credit, they brought me out for a visit, and they always got a kick of playing that on the bus. On a long trip, they would play lots of people's recruitment videos, and everybody else was a lot more professional than mine. They had like freeze frame with like the highlight, and then it would continue. And mine was just pretty budget, but they enjoyed making fun of me about that. And again, for whatever reason, I was like a very out of the loop guy with like, I didn't know who Gary Gate was or John Grant Jr. was until I started to get to like the junior age. Like I didn't grow up in the time of social media and all that. So like all these greats, and like, I didn't know St. Catharines had won the Minto Cup when I went out there, like, believe it or not. And it So Hofstra going there, I had no idea who John Danowski was or Joe Amplo were. I didn't even know what Long Island was, but they offered me a full scholarship, or I think 95% full scholarship, and it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. Um, I went out there as a face-off midi, believe it or not, and I only knew how to do the motorcycle
Mhm.
grip, but that was always enough in the field leagues in Canada. But very quickly they were like, I don't know if face-off midi is the position for you. And then once they realized I didn't really have that great of a left hand and how much I could do with my right hand, they were like, just don't even bother. Just keep it in your right hand. Everybody else, you cut with your left, but if you want to cut this way with your right nooch, like go for it. Like just make the catch. So to their credit, they really worked with my skill set, and they knew I could catch. Anything you put in my circle, I'm catching. And if I got my hands free from 14, 15 yards, it was going in more often than not. So um, John Danowski always told me, like, you're the guy at the end of the rainbow. Basically, you got to be the guy at the end of the rainbow. So I'd usually move away from where the action was and kind of find a spot for a cut or a shot, and draw double, move it twice, switch sides of the field, and I got to be the guy at the end of the rainbow there. And my third year there was really, really fun.
Mhm.
Danowski's a different kind of coach. He coaches the X's and O's a lot, but he also coaches like the human being. And he was always kind of big on, if you do the right thing all throughout your life, then when it comes to like a hard situation on the field, you're gonna do the right thing. But if you're always cutting corners and taking the easy way out all through your life, like, you think you're really gonna do the hard thing when it matters on the field, probably not. And so it was it was a it was a different level of coaching. And by my third year, I feel like everybody really kind of bought in and got on board. And you add in all the X's and O's and just all the little things, guys recovering to the middle with their sticks to get to the passing lanes. And we were able to play a very up tempo, pressure oriented type of game where we were pushing. As soon as they got over center, we were pushing out all the way to the sidelines, and we were trying to get balls back and then go down. And if you got a chance to score, we're scoring. Like, we want to score in man down. So it was a very fun time. Prior to that, it was definitely a rude awakening going to college, and seeing these poles who actually knew how to play with their sticks out in front. And they're not just looking for the big lumberjack slash.
Right.
And then all these guys and how they could play both hands. I think in box lacrosse, you would have your stick to the inside. In field lacrosse, you want your stick to the outside. And like on a pick in box, you'd pick and then you'd roll to the cage. And a lot of times they want you to pick and like pop. So like it's pretty opposite in a lot of ways. And it took me a couple of years to kind of figure that out. Um, but once I did, yeah. And then every year that I move further away from my time at Hofstra, I realized how lucky I was to have the coaching staff that I had there. And like you mentioned already, just a perennial all-star coaching staff: John Danowski, Joe Amplo, uh, Coach Smith, Coach Caputo. Like, all these guys now coach at Duke or on Team USA. And I can't overstate how lucky I was to get my education from those guys. So, yeah. And just to circle back around and finish, I think you mentioned something about not getting my last year.
Yeah.
I think I registered to go to university when I was already 21. I registered and then I started playing junior. If I would have played junior and then registered, or wait, sorry, it was the other way around. If I would have registered first and then played my junior, it would have been fine. But because I was already registered for a year of lacrosse prior to going to school, they wanted to count that. And unfortunately, we waited until my last year there to appeal that decision. And by then, I had a pretty good year. I was All American. I led the league by quite a lot in goals, and they were like, "Get this guy out of here! You're like 23 years old, buddy. Beat it." So,
Mhm.
my first year we would have had better luck. I was not a very prolific scorer my first couple of years. So,
Well, you worked your way up because I think it was 16 goals first year, 27 the second, 62 in the third year. Yeah, of course they want
yeah,
to get him out of here. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You're done, buddy. You're done. So, yeah, and that
But you
last
you
year, go ahead,
you,
sir.
you proved the thing of box and field. The box player can adjust to the field game, much more, much easier than the field guy can adjust the box. Getting blueprinted with all the skill that you have of already being on the fly and the skill of being able to shooting close, as opposed to somebody who only knows the blueprint thing and have space. Now you throw them into that box. And it's just funny because you had that when you were in Philadelphia, because Meridian tried to bring in a lot of U.S. guys to try and appease and get the crowd base back. And they had a really difficult time with the box game and being in close and also not being scripted.
Yeah, I notice that all the time. And because of that, I do try to implement a lot of box training with my field players out here. And like there's precedent in other sports too. Like Lionel Messi, the soccer player, grew up playing a different version of soccer with a smaller ball and a smaller area, with more confined space, quicker decision making. And I think it's always easier to go bigger, and you have more time and more space, and you can always kind of just go that way. Like there's no shot clock, so you have time to not rush it. But in box lacrosse, when the shot clock's ticking down, like I'm either just gonna lob it into the corner, or we might as well try to jam it in and make a play. So you play that way over and over, practice in, practice out, game in, game out, year in, year out. I think it's just bound to make a more versatile player. That being said, there's been a handful of Americans who have stepped into the box game and been, very dominant. Most notably, I would say, Casey Powell, and sorry, why am I spacing on the name right now?
Schreiber.
Mark Schreiber. Yeah. So like those two specifically stick out to me as like those are the best transitioned Americans I've ever seen. But then, like you said, there's plenty of Canadians. The list is very long who have all, made a transition into field and done very well. So I think I think the Americans are almost like they're too athletic. They're hitting those dodges and their gaps so hard. And it's like to get open and get a spot, you only got to move 10 feet, 15 feet, not 10 yards, 15 yards. And a lot of times they'll just kind of run themselves out of position. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and it's going to be interesting to see how sixes and box players and field players, like where the sixes kind of ends up because of that.
Going to be interesting.
I think so. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch the Haudenosaunee team. Traditionally they've been very, competitive with their starting lineup, but they don't necessarily have the depth that Canada or the US have to compete at field or at box. And they're always kind of right there, but with the smaller lineup, smaller field, more of a box oriented thing. Like I could see them giving Canada and the US a very, very hard time.
That idea is a slam dunk.
I think so. At first I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but if you really think about it, it's going to make the game so much more accessible to so many different other nations. The smaller rosters, you don't need to get really good at long pole. Your face-off is not as important. You can't back up shots. Like Team USA, they're winning a face-off. They're going down. They're missing 3-4 shots, backing them all up, and they have a 5-minute possession, and then they score. They go win the face-off and repeat the whole thing. And it's like some of these other countries, it's hard for them to bridge that gap. But I think this is gonna make it a more level playing field, and it's gonna be cool. So
not just the group you referred to, every country as well, because they don't need the depth, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It also takes the fogo out because there's no face-offs other than the beginning of the quarters.
Exactly.
Pulled out of the net and away it goes. So if you're celebrating for a second, you're now watching them score.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be interesting. And like I said, I'm trying to slowly build up the desire for box lacrosse in the Texas area and the Dallas Fort Worth area. And there's definitely it's starting to gain traction, and there's starting to be people who realize, to your point, that there's plenty of Canadians who have gone from box to field, not as many that have gone from field to box, and there's something there. And I think it's just the reps and the tightness and the shortness of time and space that ultimately improve you.
Let's talk about that era. Let's talk, because you get drafted to Philadelphia in the NLL, 8th overall. You come in there and talk about your first training camp. Now, you've already said you didn't know about this and because you didn't have internet and all that. When you went into your first training camp, was there anything of what you expected that it would be?
I mean, by the time I got to Philly, I had the internet. I think Facebook had been around for at least a couple of years by then. But no, you know, I don't remember my first specific training camp. Like it wasn't this kind of moment. But what I did notice was, you know, for the last 3 years, I'd been playing a lot of field. I'd be playing box in the summer. So I had a bunch of like comparison between the two. And then when I got to Philly training camp and playing for Philly that first year, even just the level of competition, it was like these guys are like, you take all stars out of all the teams in BC and all the all stars out of all the teams in Ontario, and you throw them together in an NLL team, and all of a sudden it's a different level of competition. And then I liked the fact that it was on turf. I thought that was really cool. You know, diving hurts a lot less, getting hit hurts a lot less. You get the turf burn, but it saves your hips and your elbows and all that stuff. And I really liked the 9 foot rule, where there wasn't really interference off ball, because I think that was something that really slowed down the Canadian game comparatively. And then obviously the bigger nets as a scorer are always fun too. So, but yeah, honestly, it was the level of competition. And like I said, you could put anybody on Philly that year on any team in the OLA or the BCLA, and they would have been, you know, one of the top 3 players kind of thing. So it was really cool to step into that level of competition.
Right. You hit the ground running there too, because you were rookie of the week in week 5 in your first season. Also the all rookie team. So you definitely, and as you went along the next year, you broke Gary Gates' record, 61 goals. So you definitely got the scoring touch in the NLL. But I want to talk a bit about all-star games. During your era, we had those, and you were in those. Do you think we should go back to those now? Now that we have the TV agreements, you know, with ESPN and with TSN, it's worked great with the PLL and getting interested, showing off some of the great abilities. Not just to have a game that's 98, 97, but the skills, and to show that is something I think that would rook in a whole new audience just on the absolute talent that's out there.
Yeah, what is the argument against it other than potential injury? I guess that's the only argument I can think of against it. But aside from that,
well, with the league, it's always been because it's trying to get these guys in and out, since it is still part-time.
Yeah, fair enough.
The arena logistics, and get everybody in together.
Yeah, I guess you need an all-star break in the season to do it properly, and then you're kind of messing with your schedule. You're extending your season by a bit. I mean, listen, it was cool. I enjoyed it. I thought it was the same as going from, BC lacrosse to, NCAA to the NLL, and feeling like you're really like going to the all-star game was like a whole nother level. Yep. Now you got all the all-stars on each team. It's like John Tavares, John Grant, like whatever, like all the best names. And like, that was something really cool. And I think it did do a neat thing where it just brought all the players together, and it gave you a chance to meet guys that you wouldn't otherwise meet. Right. So, I mean, simply put, I would love to see it, but I mean, I guess, like you mentioned, the injury thing is a very real concern, but I think logistics are probably even more maybe the issue.
I had pitched an idea to them that if whoever wins the championship would get the game and let them put it on and pick the date, because there's enough bye weeks in there. Pick a date and give it to the championship team as part of their championship reign.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's something that fans in every sport tend to enjoy. I don't know. I guess some people are on the fence. You look at like the NBA All-Star game, like there's been years where it's competitive and they're playing basketball, and then there's other years where it's a little bit of a, circus, and it's, maybe not the best representation of the sport. So, Yeah, it's I don't know if there's a simple answer. I would love to live in a world where there is an all-star game and it gets put on and it gets played competitively, and it's the best version of of what lacrosse has to offer, or NLL has to offer. But if they don't, then I'm sure they have a good reason for it. So
National Hockey League for a long time, their all-star game, which was invented on behalf of a player, raising money for a player, was what Gary was at least alluding to. I don't know if it's exactly what Gary is suggesting, but used to be the Stanley Cup champ would play the rest of the all-stars. That would create a little more jam in the game, I think.
interesting. I like that idea. So the championship team would play against an all-star team comprised of the rest of the league.
Yeah,
Right.
that would put some jam in the game.
Yeah, that'd be cool, man. I like that idea even more. Let's do it.
And that would keep it as non-circus, because there's always the pride thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'll sign a petition.
I like it. I like it. Now, your first real bout with injuries happens in Philadelphia around 2008 with an MCL tear. You come back, you play one game, and you're out for another year. But you come back even stronger. In 2011, you come back with a vengeance. 71 goals, 29 assists with the Wings in 2011. Let's talk about the time off, and this is really your first bout with it, and the mental preparation, as well as all the other things going to get back to where you had to be, because that took a lot right there
Yeah,
too.
fair enough. I'll just correct the record a little. Unfortunately, it was the other way around. I had 2008 season, I broke the record, and then it was the summer following that
Okay,
I
yeah.
injured my knee. I wish it was my MCL. I tore my ACL. I think I strained a couple other ligaments in there, but I also damaged my meniscus. And then when I came back the next year, for the first game back, I I basically, like, when your knee goes, it like moves like this. And I went out there, I think it was probably the first shift, and it did this again. And they're like, "Oh, you tore your ACL." I went and got an MRI, and it turned out that there was no ACL. So they drill a hole through your top bone, through the center of your joint, and then out the bottom, and they fish a ligament through there. And when they
Right.
did my MRI, the tunnel that goes through it was empty. There was no
Wow.
ripped tendon. So it was like it's a very low percentage, but basically my body reabsorbed the tendon that they put in there. And the next time I took to the floor in the summer and then in the NLL, I actually played that year. I had a big knee brace on. I was actually playing with no ACL.
Wow.
I went to the Delaware University and worked with a doctor down there, Dr. Lynn Snyder Mackler. She had done knee stuff for like Kevin Garnett and Tom Brady, and they had all this different protocol. And she had this whole thing where if you could kind of meet this level of performance without an ACL, that you could get cleared to go back to sport, and you could maybe be one of these players that can play without an ACL. And there are a couple players that are, I don't know about now, but at the time there was a couple players like in the NBA, a couple players in the NFL, NHL that all were playing without an ACL. I went through this whole program and they were like, "Yeah, you could probably do it. You can play without an ACL." And I played a season, and this is so stupid, right? Because everyone who gets injured, you want to go back. You want to get back as soon as you can. And
Yep.
instead of taking the long route back, I'm like, yeah, maybe I can play without an ACL. But it was never the same, after having an ACL and then not having an ACL, it's not the same. So I played a season like that, and I ended up getting another surgery. This time they did. The first one was like my hamstring. The second one was a cadaver, like back of your leg, not the Achilles tendon, but similar, where it goes under your heel and up. And then they
Right.
fold it in half and twist it all up. And they're like, "This is the best one that we give to anybody. We give this to the mogul skiers." And it's like, why didn't you give me that one in the first place if this is the best one? But after they gave me that, now it had been maybe 2.5 years, maybe even almost 3 years by the time I initially injured it, got a surgery, it didn't work, played without it, got another surgery, healed up. Like, now we're kind of 3 years away from initial injury, and this whole time I haven't, kind of been able to really trust my body. And I think it was a definite mental hurdle to get over. And I think even after I got my second surgery and it was in there and it held and it was strong, it still took me another, year or two of playing before I really felt. I think the next time I felt really good was in the Man Cup, our second Man Cup with the Langley Thunder, where we went to Peterborough and played them to 6 games. That was the next time I felt, kind of like myself again. So I mean, I think the other thing is too, it was a non-contact ACL injury.
Worst.
Mhm.
I was in the defensive corner going for a loose ball, and I got slashed like right on the meat of my quad, and I kind of got a dead leg, and I just kept running through it, went down to the offensive end, and there was a rebound that went towards the benches, and I was running towards the benches, and it kind of kicked left, so I went to go step this way, and I think, knowing what I know now, I didn't have very good quad control because I had the dead leg, and my leg just kind of and thankfully it was my back leg. It wasn't my like front left leg that I'm twisting on to shoot all the time. That was better. But the fact that nobody kind of hit me, I was just running. And
Yeah.
even though I had the dead leg, it was, it would almost been better if someone just cranked me, and that's what happened. And that, what can you do? But now I feel like maybe I can't trust myself just making a cut. So it was definitely it was a long road back mentally. I think I finally kind of got there mentally, but father time is undefeated. You start to feel like you can do it again mentally, and now the physical part becomes more challenging. I start having kids. I'm up to 4 kids now, and kind of circling back to our earlier thing in the conversation, where the level of dedication, commitment, obsession, it just kind of started to directly get in the way of being a good father. Really, like
Right.
I only have so much of me to go around, and it'd be different if daddy was going away to make $10 million a year to go play in the NHL or something like that. But kind of real life, I guess, kind of came knocking, and I happily answered the call. And yeah, it is what it is. I look back on all those years with great fondness, and I try to draw on all my experiences so I can help other kids, overcome what I overcame, not fall in certain pitfalls I fell into, and become the best version of themselves they can be. So
Right. Well,
Today-
sure. Sorry, go ahead, Frank. Go ahead.
Okay, today athletes are well versed in how to continue their career after an injury. I've heard a million times, where a player gets an injury and that trust of their body, it's almost like they need to get hit or something shocking that lets them know, confirms, because they need that confirmation that they're okay. That must have been really hard that went on for you for what, a year and a half, you said?
yeah, probably. And it was, yeah. I mean,
Usually it's only a couple of games, right? Maybe a game.
maybe, but I think, like I said, I injured it. I got the surgery. It didn't work. I played without an ACL. I got another surgery. I recovered. It's like, it wasn't just like a one and done. Your surgery
How
takes
do
a
you
little.
maintain your sanity, for goodness sake?
Well, it was challenging for sure. And I mean, thankfully, that wasn't really my first bout with injuries. For many years prior to college, I had lots of back issues. I remember playing through one game specifically where the guys on the other team were like, dude, just get off the floor. Like, they felt bad hitting me because it was so obvious that I was like in such disrepair on the floor. Like, just go, dude. Like, you shouldn't be playing right now. Like, guys on the other team are telling me not to play. But I mean, I don't know. You kind of just, I guess, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a certain result. But
So
like
true.
we already alluded to, like, there's a certain amount of insanity that's required. So I think I got to a good place mentally where I kind of just said, F it. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Let's just hit this thing 100 miles an hour. And if it goes, it goes. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. I kind of just got to a point where I didn't like feeling unsure or unconfident. That's not how I operated as a person or as a player for a lot of years. And eventually I kind of just threw caution to the wind, and I think I got over it. But like I said, that was kind of towards the tail end of my career. And you throw in, COVID and the disruption of the league and all that. And it it kind of just seemed like a natural time to step away. So
I just want to wrap the reason why I brought that up, because I want to make
Sure.
the point, and I think it's important for players, not only who are playing today, but players who are going to play, the attention to ensuring that your body's okay, and don't push it past what'll make it worse. Because that's the lesson I think that you were fearing, that you wanted to make sure you didn't do. And I think that's something should be injected in the discussion when it comes to injuries, when it comes to players, because they're so tempted that they don't want to sit. Right. The only ability that coaches like are availability, and that's a tempting thing. But I just wanted to make that point. I just wanted to drill down to that.
No, hey, I'll hop on the back of what you said there too, because I do coach now, and I have plenty of players who, you know, get banged up for one reason or another, and it's a tale as old as time. You get a bunch of guys, testosterone filled dudes who are playing a physical sport. Like you don't want to be that guy who's like, especially if it's something like, if I got a broken arm sticking out of the skin, everybody can see. It's like, if, oh, my back's a little sore, or my hamstring, or whatever, this unidentifiable, unseeable injury, like there's this certain level of pressure to like nut up and just get out there and do it, sort of thing. But it's, I think, you know, guys have been listening to their ego for a long time, and it's been leading them down the wrong road quite often. But you brought up a good point. I mean, it's really not worth it. It feels like you're missing out on the world today, but like, even if you keep playing all the way through and fight through the injury, like ultimately it's just shortening what you're able to do at the end of your career. And, you know, that's a tough lesson for a young man to accept and to take to heart and to really like implement. But I think it's an important one. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess sometimes some people want to say play soccer.
That's it.
You know what I mean?
From watching those games, it looks like they get injured really bad, really often. So I mean, it doesn't seem that safe either.
No kidding.
I like that. Let's pivot into your coaching. How did you begin? Because taking a look at the coaches that you had over the years, I just put together just a little thing: Johnny Meridian, Lindsay Sanderson, Dave Huntley, John Tucker. We talked about Danowski and his crew. You've had some great coaches, Hall of Fame coaches. This all went part and parcel into you now becoming a coach and taking bits and pieces and making it yours. How did you get involved in coaching, and where it's led to you now with, of course, with NLL Lacrosse, MVP Lacrosse, and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started pretty organically. Just, you know, in junior, even my first couple of years of college, there's always kind of opportunities to help out with the younger age groups. So I got into, you know, that was kind of my first foray into coaching, doing little camps and clinics here. And then from there, it's, you know, those who can't do teach. And I think I do love the game. I love being around the competition and the growth and development and the effort and the camaraderie. And it just, I guess the more opportunities I got to coach, the more I realized I actually have, you know, like you said, I have this this repertoire that I've picked up from all these different influences along the way. And man, I have quite a lot to offer some of these kids growing up. And not only that, I enjoy doing it. And, you know, I hope I'm getting better and better at it as I go along, but I have good response from my players. I have good response from my parents, and yeah, I just try to do my best to pick and choose from the different things that I've learned from different coaches along the way, along with my own experiences. And you know, also lacrosse has really started to grow as a sport. I mean, it has been ever since I started playing. And then I think also the other big component is getting introduced to lacrosse in the United States. There's a definite culture difference in sports in the USA versus sports in Canada. It's very much pay to play down here. You know, you get what you pay for, whether that's coaching, club, whatever. Everything in Canada was done through your community. You played for Coquitlam or you played for Port Moody, the city that you live in.
Right.
In the States, it's very much like, yeah, you do play for your school, but it's almost like the club that you play for kind of takes precedence over that. I play for Mad Dog or Advance or Merrill, whatever. There's hundreds of them out there, but it seems like that's kind of more important, and that's what players sort of lean on more.
Right.
So getting exposed to America and just the amount of opportunity there is out there for people who want coaching, who are willing to pay for coaching, they're not just relying on, well, the adnacs go from here to here, and then the rest of the year we're playing soccer or whatever. There's a very much like tons of like one sport athletes down here, and they all want to do it year round. So it just, supply and demand.
That creates an interesting situation that diverges from where you were before. If I'm hearing you right, it almost sounds as though it's more open, like because you're not having a singular organization running everything. Instead, you have a bunch of organizations part of the. There's a lot of openness to new ideas. I would think in that world.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. There's definitely something. It just seems like it's become more commonplace. I think it's maybe just the level of competition. Like what is it? There's 30 million people, 35 million people in Canada, and there's like 350 million in America. Like there's just, at a certain point, there's more kids that you're competing with. I think the level of competition is it just kind of makes more opportunities, more niches to fill. And there's just a real, I don't know how true this is. My friend's dad, who I know, would always talk about, he was a salesman and he'd do stuff in Canada and in the US, and Canada would always ask, well, how much is this going to cost me? And in the States, they would always ask, like, how much can I make from this kind of thing? And I don't know, maybe there's like a sliver of truth in that, but there definitely seems to be a more prevalent mindset in like, dude, if I pay for extra coaching from a good coach, like that's going to advance my kid faster than if I just take whatever the community happens to offer out. And I don't know. So
you answered my question.
Did I?
Yeah, you answered my question. The freedom and opportunity for there being various chances or opportunities gives people, at least they feel they have and I think this, I'll try to boil it down like this. It offers an opportunity to think where you can find the best opportunity, as opposed to going to one place and hoping that it offers you the best opportunity.
Yeah, but honestly, don't think that there's not something given up from that too, because it's been very interesting when you compare, the camaraderie and the family feel and the togetherness that you get from playing for Coquitlam Madnax or Port Moody, whoever, or the Burnaby Lakers, right? Like there's, in the States, I don't know, there's something weird. It definitely doesn't have the same level of everybody wanting to be together all the time. And I feel like that's something that I'm always trying to bring from what I learned in Canada into all the teams and the clubs that I coach in the States. And, to the credit of the parents and the players, they're both like, this is awesome. Like, I love how the coaches never come out for food after the game with all the parents and players. And it's like, of course I'm going to come out. Like, this is what we do this for. And like, it's not as prevalent down here. I'm not really sure why. Guys don't hang out in the locker room for an hour after practice. They don't shower. They just throw on their gear and they head home in their own separate ways. And there's just not a lot of camaraderie.
I think you're defining the difference about America and Canada a little bit, just a little bit. I don't want to sound like I'm judging, but
no.
At the end of the day, right? It's about what you're used to.
And I mean, we all judge. You just don't want to judge unfairly or judge harshly. Yeah. And I understand there's a difference, but I mean, I think there's a lot that Canada can learn from the ways that America does things, and vice versa. There's way more structure. I'm not saying that there's not really good coaching in Canada, but just like overall, on average, the level of coaching in America seems to be higher. And like, there's I don't know. There's definitely differences. But like I said, it's hard to get one without losing the other too much. So if you're just running all over the place, trying to get the best here, the best there, the best here, the best there, and never just kind of sticking with one place and moving together as a group, there's pros and cons to each sort of thing. So
I think what you're saying is there's a lot of ways to get to where we want to be. And you should be able to have the freedom to figure out which way is the best for you and what works for you. Yep. Right. So you're lucky to have that opportunity to work there because, you're getting a whole different picture, which makes, I guess, what you do even more interesting.
Yeah, no, it's really fun, man. It's been super enjoyable. This Alito program that we just started. So I didn't know much about Alito in the first place. It's a town, west of Fort Worth, Texas, and they have won the most amount of high school football state championships out of any school in Texas anyway. And man, it's literally like Friday Night Lights. Like you go through the town, there's like posters up everywhere. The commercials that come on TV have like high school kids like featured in them. It's wild. And these boys and these parents wanted to start a lacrosse program there. And I think we're only 3 games in now, but man, it's been so much fun. I have yet to find a group of kids who are more just gung ho, like, just super intense, super athletic. They love the physicality. They try super hard. It's been so fun. And it's been interesting to watch them all kind of make the transition from football into lacrosse. And I think we're going to surprise some teams in a couple of years.
That's the question I wanted to ask. Are they more baseball or football?
No, they're more football for sure. They're a football team.
Well, there's a combination necessary in lacrosse. Gary, can you imagine?
Oh yeah, box the cross with a football ball. Yeah, I can see that one working. It's a perfect partnership, and with the right people at the helm, how to home that skill into the box. I think you got something there, and I love what US Boxlet does too now. And they've spent an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money, not just on the here in Canada. We spent a lot of time on the guys who are going to try and become pros from junior on upward. Now in the U.S., I think they got it more together by more grassroots programs and working with the youth and working with even the kids who aren't going to make it, but giving them that opportunity.
Outlet,
opportunity. They love it and to move up. Go ahead.
Shaden Santos is great, and I love US Boxla as well. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. They definitely are focusing on your developing athletes, and whether you play for your young part of your life or whether you go all the way to the end. I mean, there's a lot that lacrosse can teach you, a lot that lacrosse can offer. It's obviously an awesome game. All 3 of us know that. But yeah, he's done a great job there, and I hope he keeps building out the box side of things because it makes my job easier down here for sure.
Well, I'm not going to shame Canada, but I will tell you the U.S. has the reputation for building athletes, and they're very coached up. And they spend a fair bit of money to do it. It wasn't until the Vancouver Olympics where you were that Canada didn't really spend money on the Olympic athletes to help them train. So, there's an investment required, not just by the athletes, but those around them.
And by the community in general. And it's really cool. Like, I think most people have seen Friday Night Lights, and you go out to a Tuesday night high school game that's 3 games into the season, doesn't really mean anything for the end of the year. And there's 5,000 people in the crowd. There's cheerleaders getting flipped up in the air and marching bands and streamers going off. And it's like, you do get what you put in to some extent, but it's like, I don't know, man, there's like you said, there's multiple ways to get where you want to go, but there's definitely a certain level of like community and grit that I found existed in Canada. That is not that it's not here, but just on average, it's not at the same level. And I mean, maybe part of that is just the nature of box lacrosse.
Or the social fabric.
Well, and I think socially too, like, look, box lacrosse in Canada was oftentimes a sport that if you couldn't afford to play hockey or your parents didn't want to get early or whatever, like it was a very blue collar sport. It didn't cost a lot to get into. And it didn't really compete with some other things. It was in the summer when school was off anyway. And, you know, down in the US, it seems like it's a very kind of white collar sport. If you look at all the best high school teams, they're all private schools with like pretty high tuition rates. And I mean, there's pros and cons to both of these. You know what I mean? You have very, 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 very coachable kids who are just like, yes, sir, absolutely. Like, but they could be a little bit robotic, right? And then on the other end of things, you got Canadians who like don't even know what a gym looks like, but like they'll run headfirst through a brick wall for you, and they go out to the box every single day. And it's like, I don't think it's a matter of like which one's better. It's like, what can each of us learn from the other? And if Americans could learn some of that like blue collar attitude, just do it on your own, grit, attitude, community, and like Canadians could learn some of the like, dude, look at what coaching can do and just the structuredness of how things are run. I think that both sides could sort of flourish a lot from that. And that's all I'm kind of trying to do is, like you mentioned, I've been fortunate enough to be around really, really good Canadian box coaches, really, really good American field coaches, and I'm just trying my best to kind of unite the state of the game as much as possible here in Texas and teach what I've learned. So I've been blessed and fortunate to be able to do that.
I learned a lot about the programs when we had the women just after the World Box Championships. We were lucky enough to have Megan Keena and Dana Dobie from Canada, and Emily Harris-Chuck and Aaron Bakes on from the U.S. And listening to, and it was shocking because listening to the U.S. women and talk about glowingly how U.S. Boxer really helped and had the programs and had this and had that and worked with Gate Lacrosse and they had the. And then we're talking to the Canadians, and they didn't even have a practice till 2 weeks before the championships, and this was and this didn't work, and I would have thought it'd been the other way around.
Interesting,
coming from all this lineage here in Canada, and that was kind of eye-opening to me. But it also solidified what I thought about U.S. box law and how organized they are at the top, but not just for the top guys to work their way down on both sides, women and men. So I think the future is really bright in the U.S. for these kids. And again, with coaches like you who are able to bring both field and box. And you'd mentioned, those who can do and those who can't teach. Well, you did. And you're able to portray that message into it with other coaching. And that's a whole other skill set to go with it.
Yeah, it definitely helps. I try not to. It always feels weird, oh, I did this and I did that back in the day. I could throw a football this, but like it definitely helps, when kids figure out that you actually have, done some of the things they want to do, and they find some grainy old footage of you on YouTube and they're like, oh, coach, you were actually good at lacrosse. You're not just some guy. And then, so it definitely is helpful. But man, it's honestly the way the game's going right now. It's pretty exciting just to wait and see what things are going to be like in the next 10, 15 years. I feel like we're kind of the Bobby Orr, like pre-Gretzky, like early NHL era. And like, in the next 10, 20 years, like we're going to start getting into the Sidney Crosby type era of guys, so it's cool.
Well, if you want any footage, remember I told you I have the all across all the time YouTube page with all of Bill Fox's old retro games. Just lead them on there, and they can catch all the retro games, including some games that have you in there.
All right, I'll check it out.
Absolutely.
That's all that Athan. That's you're a part of what happened with hockey in the U.S. as football happened in Canada here, up where we live, in the area that we live, and that is that former players hang around in new neighborhoods and bring an old game that's new to them and helps them learn. And that's the kind of growth that you're contributing to. So thank you for doing that, for helping to make lacrosse bigger and better.
No, I'm proud to do it. And hopefully I can leave a positive mark here. So yeah, thank you.
I think you will.
Absolutely. I really want to thank you for taking the time. I know it's March break and you have other things that you could be doing, but I love the conversation, and I love hearing how you're enhancing all these programs outside and after the playing days. So, kudos to you and all the best, and best of luck. If you need us to help market or anything you need to do, please reach out.
I very much appreciate that.
Anytime. So he's Athan Iannucci, a former NLL player, now a coach and spreading the wings of lacrosse players in Texas. He joined us. This has been NLL Lacrosse Talk. I'm Candid Frank. Thanks for watching.
Hands.
Oh, jeez.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Love it.